The rain had barely stopped when Michael Harrington stood at the edge of his sprawling California estate, staring at the hills beyond. The mansion behind him, once filled with music and laughter, now echoed only with silence. 2 years earlier, a sudden accident had taken his wife, leaving him to raise their only child alone. His daughter, Emily, just 8 years old, was now fighting a battle no child should ever face: leukemia. The illness had stolen her joy, her voice, and even the sparkle in her eyes. The house, with its marble floors and grand windows, had become more like a mausoleum than a home. Michael's footsteps seemed louder in the emptiness, each creak of the wood reminding him of what was gone. He would return from work each evening to find Emily curled in bed, staring at the ceiling, refusing to talk or eat more than a few bites. Friends and doctors had told him to keep hope alive, but hope was hard to find when every day looked darker than the last. Michael tried everything: toys, favorite books, even trips to the seaside, but nothing broke through the invisible wall his daughter had built around herself. Nights were the hardest. He would sit outside her door, listening for any sign of life, wishing for the sound of her laughter that had once been the soul of their home. But the silence remained, heavy and unyielding, as if grief itself had taken up residence with them. He didn't know it yet, but change was already on its way, in the form of someone who would step quietly into their lives and turn that silence into something entirely different. When the agency first sent her name over, Michael Harrington didn't think much of it. He'd gone through 3 housekeepers in the last year, each polite, capable, and gone within weeks. Some left because of the long hours, others because the weight of the house's silence was too much to bear. So when they said her name, Danielle Carter, he barely glanced at the rest of the file. A young woman in her late 20s, African-American, a patchwork resume that hinted at a life that hadn't been easy. He assumed she'd be like the others, come in, keep to herself, and eventually drift away. The first day Danielle walked through the heavy front doors, she carried no air of intimidation, despite the cavernous marble foyer. She had a crown of tight black curls haloing her face, and eyes that didn't dart nervously, like most new hires. Instead, she took in the space with quiet focus, like she was cataloging, not just what needed cleaning, but where life had stopped moving. She smiled warmly at Michael, but it wasn't the forced, overly polite smile he'd grown used to. It was steady, genuine, almost disarming. She began work quickly, her movements efficient but never rushed. In those first few hours, Michael noticed something peculiar. She didn't avoid the upstairs hall, where Emily's room was. Most staff gave that part of the house a wide berth. Emily, withdrawn and silent for months, had made it clear she didn't want to be disturbed. Danielle, however, lingered in the hallway when she passed by, not pressing, not intruding, just present. It was late afternoon when Michael returned from his home office and caught the sound. Faint at first, so faint he thought it was his imagination. A laugh. Not the muffled, polite chuckle of an adult, but the small, bubbling giggle of a child. He froze in the hallway, his pulse quickening. He hadn't heard that sound in months, not since before the hospital stays and the endless blood tests. Drawn toward it like a man afraid it might vanish, he followed the sound to the living room. There, in a patch of golden light from the tall windows, Emily sat cross-legged on the couch. Her thin frame was wrapped in a soft blanket, and perched on her head was a chestnut brown wig, styled simply but beautifully. She was laughing, actually laughing, as Danielle knelt in front of her, adjusting a loose strand, with the care of someone handling a rare jewel. Michael stopped in the doorway, afraid that moving might break the spell. Danielle's voice was low, playful. "You're smiling so much, I think the wig's going to slide right off," she teased. Emily's shoulders shook with another fit of giggles. "It feels funny," she admitted, between laughs. Danielle tilted her head. "Funny good, or funny bad?" Emily hesitated for just a beat before answering, "Funny happy." The simplicity of it hit Michael like a wave. Happy. He couldn't remember the last time his daughter had said that word. He stayed silent, watching Danielle work. She didn't treat Emily like she was fragile glass. She didn't hover. She just sat there, grounded, letting Emily's curiosity lead. "You know," Danielle said softly, "when my cousin lost her hair, she didn't want to leave her room. Thought everyone would stare. But when she put on her first wig, she said it felt like she got a little piece of herself back." Emily looked up, intrigued. "Did she keep it?" Danielle nodded. For years. Said it was her superhero disguise. Michael saw the change in Emily's eyes, bright, thoughtful, alive, in a way he hadn't seen in months. She reached up to touch the wig, almost reverently. The gesture was small, but it carried something profound. Choice. Control. A sense of self. Danielle leaned back just slightly, studying Emily's face as if she were taking a mental picture. There she is, she murmured, a smile touching her lips. Emily reached for Danielle's hand without hesitation, and Danielle took it, giving it a light squeeze. Do you like it? She asked. Emily nodded. It feels like me, but different, like I could go to school, and nobody would. Her voice faltered. Danielle filled the pause gently. Nobody would see anything but Emily. And Emily is amazing. Michael's throat tightened. He'd tried for months to give his daughter that exact reassurance. Toys, trips, promises, all of it had failed. Yet here was this woman, barely a day into her job, giving Emily back something that had been locked away. When Emily finally noticed him in the doorway, she smiled, an unforced, genuine smile that pulled him straight back to a time before hospitals and fear. You're home early, she said, as if it were just another day. Michael stepped inside, unsure whether to thank Danielle or simply let the moment breathe. Emily tilted her head toward him proudly. Look. Danielle found this for me. Danielle shook her head gently. I just helped her try it on. She did the rest. As Michael stood there, the reality settled in. This wasn't just about a wig. It was about connection. Trust. Somehow, Danielle had found a way through to his daughter where no one else could. That night, after Emily had gone to bed, Michael found himself lingering in the kitchen, his doorway as Danielle cleaned up. She didn't seem to notice his gaze, but he saw the quiet confidence in her movements. It wasn't arrogance, it was knowing exactly what she had given back to Emily that day. He thought of that first laugh, of the way Emily's shoulders had relaxed, of the light in her eyes when she said funny happy. And for the first time in a very long while, Michael felt something stir inside him, a cautious, fragile hope. Danielle Carter had walked into his house as just another employee. But after one afternoon, she had already changed something fundamental in their lives. From the moment Danielle Carter stepped into the Harrington home, she seemed to understand that her job was never just about keeping the place clean. Michael had hired her for her competence. But what she brought was something much more rare, a kind of quiet intuition about people and pain. She didn't force her presence on Emily, didn't try to entertain her or coax her into conversation with exaggerated cheerfulness. Instead, she let herself be noticed in small, careful ways. A warm greeting in the hallway, a casual comment about the weather, a question that never demanded an answer. In the first week, Danielle learned that Emily's self-consciousness about her appearance was deeper than anyone realized. The little girl rarely left her room without her scarf tied tightly, the fabric a kind of armor. Danielle never pushed her to remove it. Instead, she shared stories, not grand, dramatic ones, but personal fragments from her own life. One afternoon, as they sat together at the kitchen counter, Danielle painted her nails a soft lavender and began talking about her younger sister, Mia. Mia used to hate her freckles, Danielle said, smiling at the memory. She'd try to hide them under makeup, even though I told her they made her look like she'd been kissed by the sun. Emily glanced up from the book she was pretending to read, curiosity flickering in her eyes. What happened? She asked softly. Danielle shrugged. One day she just decided to stop hiding them. Said they were part of her story. Now she wears them like jewelry. The exchange was brief, but Michael noticed the change afterward. Emily lingered downstairs. A little longer that day. She asked Danielle what color she should paint her nails next. There was a shift, subtle, but real. Over the next weeks, Danielle found ways to build on that trust. She invited Emily to help her in the kitchen, letting her choose the cheese for the macaroni or the sprinkles for cupcakes. She never commented on the scarf, but when Emily's hair began to grow in soft, uneven tufts, Danielle told her a story about her cousin, who had shaved her head during the summer heat. Just for fun. She said it made her feel free, Danielle explained. Like she was lighter. Somehow. Perhaps most importantly, Danielle respected the space Emily kept for her mother. In Emily's room, a framed photo of Laura Harrington sat on the dresser beside a small vase of dried flowers. No one touched it, Michael himself had never dared to move it. Danielle didn't either. But one quiet evening, as she folded laundry on Emily's bed, she noticed the girl, tracing her finger along the frame. "She had your smile," Danielle said softly. Emily looked startled, then blinked quickly. "You think so?" Danielle nodded. "And your eyes. Brave eyes." There was no pity in her tone. No attempt to change the subject. Instead, she let Emily talk about the way her mother used to braid her hair before school, how she would hum while making pancakes on Saturday mornings. Danielle didn't fill the silences, she simply listened. Michael, passing by the doorway that night, froze at the sound of Emily's voice open, unguarded, speaking about her mother without tears. He realized he had avoided those conversations, thinking he was protecting his daughter. But Danielle had given Emily something he hadn't, permission to remember without breaking. One afternoon, when the sun streamed through the living room windows, Danielle set out a small box on the coffee table. "Thought we could try something," she said, opening it to reveal colorful headbands and scarves, each neatly folded. Emily hesitated. "I don't know." Danielle smiled. "No rules. You pick one. We'll just see how it feels." Emily's fingers hovered over a bright turquoise scarf. She picked it up and studied the pattern. "This one reminds me of the ocean," she murmured. Danielle draped it gently over her head, adjusting the knot so it sat comfortably. "There," she said. "Now you look like someone about to sail somewhere wonderful." Emily's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Do you think people will stare?" she asked. Danielle's answer was firm but kind. "They might. But they'll be staring at someone beautiful, not someone broken." It was a turning point. From then on, Emily began experimenting with the scarves. Headbands, sometimes even wearing them without the protective scarf underneath. She still had days where she retreated to her room, but they were fewer now, and her laughter came more easily. Michael often found himself watching these moments from a distance, Emily leaning against Danielle on the porch steps, the two of them painting each other's nails, or sitting cross-legged on the rug surrounded by colored pencils and scraps of paper. Danielle had somehow woven herself into Emily's world, without disturbing the fragile threads that connected her to the past. One evening, as the three of them sat in the kitchen after dinner, Emily told Danielle about a dream she'd had. "Mom was there," she said quietly, "and she was brushing my hair." Danielle didn't tell her it was just a dream. She didn't try to make it something it wasn't. Instead, she reached out and brushed an imaginary strand from Emily's forehead. "She'd be proud of you," she said. "Not just for being strong, but for still letting yourself laugh." Michael caught Emily's expression, serious, thoughtful, but anchored, and understood that Danielle had become more than a caretaker. She was a bridge, connecting Emily's memories of her mother to the present without erasing either. And slowly, almost without realizing it, Michael began to feel the same. Danielle's presence had softened the air in the house, replacing the brittle silence with something warmer. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was in the way Emily now looked forward to mornings, in the easy conversations over dinner, in the fact that the house no longer felt like a place where life had stopped. Danielle hadn't just helped Emily find her voice again. She'd given both father and daughter a reason to believe that the world, even after so much loss, could still be a place worth stepping back into. It started with an offhand remark, the kind that was wrapped in a smile but edged with something sharper. Michael Harrington had been cornered near the polished oak bar at the Parments Country Club by an old acquaintance, Peter Calloway, a man whose handshake was always firm but whose eyes carried a perpetual flicker of judgment. "So," Peter began, swirling the ice in his glass, "I hear you've got new help at home." His tone was casual, almost lazy, but Michael caught the deliberate weight on the word help. "Danielle, right? She's around quite a bit, I hear." Michael forced a neutral smile. "She's been good for Emily." Peter's brow lifted ever so slightly. "Good for her? In what way?" He didn't need to say more. The implication was already there. Danielle didn't fit the mold of the people Peter thought should be part of Michael's private world, certainly not someone who looked the way she did or came from the life she'd lived. Michael ended the conversation quickly, but the words lingered like a splinter under the skin. Driving home that evening, the polished calm of the club gave way to the quiet hum of the city streets. Peter's insinuations rolled through Michael's mind, unwanted but stubborn. He told himself they didn't matter. Danielle's work spoke for itself. Emily's progress spoke for itself. But as the mansion's gates closed behind him, he realized the remark had already altered something in him. Danielle was in the kitchen when he came in, sleeves rolled up, rinsing vegetables at the sink. "Hey," she greeted him warmly, her voice light but steady. Michael returned the greeting, but there was a stiffness in his tone that hadn't been there before. She noticed it was clear from the way her smile dimmed just slightly before she turned back to the sink. At dinner, Danielle helped Emily set the table, as she always did. But she was quieter than usual, letting Michael take the lead in conversation. Emily, quick to sense even the smallest shift, looked between them with faint confusion. The usual spark in Danielle's eyes when she teased Emily into laughing wasn't there. Halfway through the meal, Emily put her fork down and asked softly, "Why aren't you smiling like before?" The question seemed to land in the center of the table with a dull thud. Danielle glanced at Michael, then answered gently, "Just a little tired today." Emily didn't look convinced. "But you're different," she said, almost whispering. Michael felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He wanted to jump in, to explain that it wasn't Danielle's fault, that the change had come from him. But the words stayed lodged in his throat. The rest of the meal passed in shallow conversation, Michael asking about Emily's reading, Danielle reminding her about homework, all of it careful, measured. The easy rhythm they'd built over the past weeks had faltered. When Emily excused herself, heading upstairs with her book, Michael lingered in the kitchen doorway, as Danielle began clearing plates. "Thanks for dinner," he said, the words stiff. She nodded without looking up. He wanted to say more, to explain about Peter's comment, to admit that he hated himself for letting it seep into his behavior. But pride and discomfort held him back. Later that night, Michael stopped by Emily's room. She was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. "Is Danielle mad?" she asked without turning toward him. "No," he said quickly. "She's just quiet today." Emily frowned. "It feels different." Her words stayed with him long after he turned out the light. He realized then how fragile Emily's progress was. How quickly the light could dim if something disrupted the connection she had with Danielle. The idea that his own hesitation, born from someone else's prejudice, could jeopardize that progress made his chest ache. In the days that followed, Michael caught himself watching Danielle more closely, not to scrutinize her, but to notice the little absences. The way she no longer lingered in the hallway to chat with Emily before bedtime. How she kept her focus on the tasks at hand instead of finding small ways to draw Emily into conversation. Emily, in turn, grew quieter again, her laughter less frequent. One afternoon, Michael stood in his office doorway, listening to the faint hum of voices from the living room. Danielle was helping Emily with a puzzle, her tone patient but subdued. He realized then that Peter's comment had been like a stone dropped into a pond, sending ripples through a space that had once been calm. That evening, as he passed Emily's room, he overheard her say to Danielle, "I like it when you laugh." Danielle's reply was soft but carried a hint of something heavier. "I'll try to do better." It was in that moment Michael understood, Peter's opinion, or anyone else's, meant nothing compared to the light in his daughter's eyes. Emily's happiness, her slow return to herself, was worth more than every polished approval the world could offer. He found Danielle in the kitchen later, sleeves still rolled, hair pulled back loosely. "I've been distant," he admitted, the words rough in his throat. "And it's not about you, it's about me. Letting someone else's ignorance get in my head. I'm sorry." Danielle looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Emily needs stability. And so do you." Michael managed a small smile. "I know." And for the first time in days, Danielle's lips curved into something warmer. It wasn't a full return to the easy laughter yet, but it was enough, a sign that the air in the house could shift back again, away from shadows and toward light. He promised himself then that he wouldn't let anyone's whispered judgment stand between his daughter and the person who had helped her find joy again. The world could keep its narrow rules. Inside these walls, happiness came first. It began quietly, the way storms sometimes do without warning, but with a heaviness that could not be ignored. Michael Harrington found Emily curled on the living room sofa, a book slipping from her hands. When he touched her forehead, the heat made him flinch. She mumbled something about feeling cold, even as her skin burned under his palm. He didn't wait for a second check. Years of navigating her leukemia treatments had taught him the danger of fevers. Within minutes, the overnight bag was packed, and they were in the car heading for the hospital. Emily's head rested against his chest, her breathing shallow. At triage, he rattled off medications, recent labs, allergies, the litany every oncology parent carries in their memory. The nurses moved quickly, threading an IV, drawing blood, starting antibiotics. Emily barely responded, her gaze fixed on the wall, her small hands limp at her sides. Hours passed in the fluorescent glow of the pediatric oncology unit. Michael tried reading to her, telling stories, even playing the playlist she and Danielle had made together. Nothing stirred her. She turned away from him when he adjusted her blanket, the same way she had during the darkest months after her diagnosis. Then, just as he was counting the slow drip of the IV, he heard her voice, a whisper so faint he almost missed it. "Where's Danielle?" The question hit him like a blow. Not "Can I have water?" Or "When can we go home?" But, "Where's Danielle?" In that moment, he realized she wasn't asking for comfort in general. She was asking for the one person whose presence had the power to reach her. Michael stepped into the hallway and flagged down the nurse. "Is there any way I can get someone added to the visitor list tonight?" he asked. The nurse shook her head apologetically. "Not unless she's a guardian. We can approve her for tomorrow, but tonight phone calls only." Tomorrow felt like a lifetime away. Back in the room, he sent a brief text, "Fever. She's quiet. Asking for you." Then he waited, checking his phone every few minutes. No response. He hated the sharp pang of helplessness in his chest, hated more that he couldn't give Emily what she needed right now. By dawn, exhaustion had settled into his bones, but the need to act was stronger than sleep. Before the nurses changed shifts, he left the hospital and drove across town. He found Danielle at the bus stop, tote bag slung over her shoulder, curls catching the early morning light. She looked surprised to see him. "She's asking for you," he said, his voice breaking despite his effort to keep it steady. There were no questions, no hesitation. "Let's go," she replied. The drive back was quiet, but not awkward. Danielle's gaze stayed on the window, her hands clasped loosely in her lap. Halfway there, she asked softly, "How bad?" Michael gripped the wheel. "Bad enough that she's somewhere I can't reach her." Danielle nodded once, the kind of nod that meant she understood exactly what he meant. When they arrived, Michael spoke briefly to the front desk. The staff recognized him and allowed them through without delay. The moment Danielle stepped into Emily's hospital room, the atmosphere shifted. Emily's eyes fluttered open at the sound of the door, her gaze fixing on Danielle as if she'd been waiting all night for this exact moment. "Hey, baby girl," Danielle said, her voice low and warm. She set her tote on the chair and pulled out a soft, bright blue headband. "Brought you something. Blue is for strength." She eased it gently over Emily's head, adjusting it so it sat just right. Emily's hand lifted, brushing the fabric, and a faint smile tugged at her lips. It was small, but unmistakable. Danielle didn't rush into chatter. She sat beside the bed, holding Emily's hand, letting her study her face. Then, with casual steadiness, she reached for the small paper cup of medication on the bedside table. "I know this part's not fun," she said. "But strong girls do hard things, right?" Emily hesitated. Michael had seen this moment before, the pause that usually ended with her pushing the cup away. But this time, she reached for it, placed the pill on her tongue, and sipped the water without complaint. The nurse who came in to chart the time looked mildly surprised. "That was quick," she remarked. Danielle only smiled faintly, keeping her eyes on Emily. Michael stood at the foot of the bed, the tension in his chest loosening for the first time in nearly 24 hours. He understood now. It wasn't just about Danielle making Emily comfortable. It was about trust. A thread between them that no one else could weave. Emily's eyelids began to droop, her grip on Danielle's hand, loosening only when sleep pulled hair under. Danielle adjusted the blanket, tucking it with the kind of precision that looked less like habit and more like a promise. Michael leaned against the wall, humbled. This wasn't about appearances or what people like Peter Calloway might think. It was about survival, Emily's spirit, her fight, her willingness to take the next step in her recovery. And Danielle had given her that step tonight. For the first time in days, Michael believed his daughter might not only wake to another morning, but wake to the sound of her own laughter again. The days that followed Danielle Carter's arrival at the hospital became a rhythm unlike anything Michael Harrington had seen since Emily's diagnosis. Danielle didn't just visit, she showed up every morning, tote bag over her shoulder, as if she belonged to that sterile room. As much as the IV stand, and the whiteboard with Emily's name written in uneven marker. Inside the bag, she always carried something unexpected, a small watercolor set one day, a bundle of postcards the next, a doll with yarn hair they braided and unbraided between. Treatments. She never asked Emily if she wanted to participate. She simply set up a space by the large window overlooking the hospital gardens, laid out their supplies, and began. Inevitably, Emily would drift over, curiosity outweighing fatigue. Michael often arrived to find them deep in some project, Emily concentrating on painting the petals of a sunflower, Danielle pretending to mix magic colors that only Emily knew how to create. The garden window became their claimed territory, a spot where treatments and lab results faded into the background. It was during one of these quiet afternoons that Emily first noticed the second window, a smaller, square pane set high on the opposite wall. Unlike the garden view, this one overlooked the street, where the tops of passing cars and a strip of sky were just visible. "That one's for when we leave," Emily said simply, pointing to it. Michael, standing nearby, looked up. "What do you mean?" "When we go home," she explained, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "I'm going to wave to it, so it knows I kept my promise." Danielle didn't interrupt. She tied off the friendship bracelet she had been weaving from blue and yellow threads and slipped it onto Emily's wrist. "Then we'd better make sure you're wearing something bright when you wave," she said, "so it sees you right away." Emily giggled, clutching the bracelet, as if it were a secret talisman. Michael, watching the slight exchange, felt something shift inside him. For weeks, he had measured progress in numbers. White blood cell counts, temperature readings, dosage levels. Now there was this new measure, the quiet confidence in Emily's voice, when she claimed that window as a promise. Over the next days, the second window became part of their daily routine. Between painting sessions, Danielle and Emily would glance toward it, sometimes waving as if sending a silent message. On difficult days, when the treatments left her pale and listless, Emily would simply point to it, and Danielle would nod, the unspoken reminder hanging between them. "We're getting there." Danielle wove the idea into everything they did. When they wrote pretend postcards to imaginary places, one was always addressed to the leaving window. When they played tic-tac-toe, Danielle would joke that winning 3 in a row meant they were 3 steps closer to waving goodbye through that glass. Michael found himself looking toward the second window, too. At first it felt silly, just a piece of glass in a hospital wall. But as Emily's strength returned in slow, steady increments, the window began to feel like more than that. It was an anchor for hope, a fixed point to aim for in a world where so much was uncertain. One afternoon, he arrived to see Emily perched in bed, pale pink polish drying on her nails, while Danielle worked on her own in a deep forest green. "When we leave," Emily told him, "you have to stand by the garden window so I can see you while I wave from the leaving." "One." Michael smiled. "You've got it." The small rituals they built around that promise gave shape to the long hospital days. And, even on nights when fever made Emily restless, Danielle could settle her with a simple, "Don't forget, the window's waiting." Emily would smile faintly, roll over, and drift back to sleep. As discharge day drew closer, Michael noticed a change in himself, too. The anxiety that had kept him on edge for months didn't vanish, but it softened. Watching Danielle give Emily a reason to believe in after made him believe in it again as well. When the day finally came, Emily insisted on wearing the brightest scarf in her collection, a turquoise and gold pattern Danielle had brought weeks earlier. Standing between them, Michael walked her to the second window. She pressed her palm to the glass, peering down at the street. "Ready?" Danielle asked. Emily nodded, grinning, and waved. It wasn't just a gesture. It was a declaration that she had endured, that she was going home, that the promise she made to herself had been kept. Michael looked from Emily to Danielle and realized the truth. This wasn't simply about leaving the hospital. The window had become a symbol of everything Danielle had helped restore: Emily's joy, her courage, and the belief that the world outside was still waiting for her. And as they stepped out into the crisp air, Michael glanced back up at that square of glass, certain it had been watching them all along. Spring sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the Harrington home, carrying with it the kind of warmth Michael hadn't felt in what seemed like years. Emily had been home from the WAMF hospital for a few weeks now, and though her strength was still returning in careful increments, the change in her was undeniable. Her laughter, real, unforced, was slowly becoming a familiar sound again. She spent her afternoons reading in the sunlit corner of the living room, playing card games with Michael, or trailing Danielle into the kitchen to help with dinner. One afternoon, Michael walked in to find Emily sitting cross-legged on the couch, a small box in her lap. Danielle, coming in from the hallway, looked at her with curiosity. Emily's eyes sparkled with mischief as she lifted the lid and pulled out a swirl-patterned scarf of turquoise and gold. "This is for you," she announced, holding it out. Danielle blinked. "For me?" Emily nodded firmly. "You've been bringing me things for months. Now it's my turn." Without waiting for permission, she climbed down from the couch, came to stand behind Danielle, and began gathering her curls into the scarf. Danielle stayed still, offering the occasional instruction, "A little tighter, or that's perfect." When Emily finished, she stepped back and grinned with pride. "Perfect," Emily declared. Danielle gave a playful model's turn, earning a burst of laughter that made her eyes crinkle. Without thinking, Emily clambered into Danielle's lap, looping her arms around her neck. Danielle held her close, chin resting on Emily's head, the scarf slightly askew now, but neither of them cared. Michael stood in the doorway, the scene warming something deep inside him. He reached for his phone, not to interrupt, but to preserve the moment. He framed the shot so it held everything: the scarf's bright colors, Emily's wide smile, and the quiet steadiness in Danielle's expression. The click of the shutter felt almost ceremonial. Later that evening, while Danielle and Emily prepared dinner together, Michael printed the photo. He found a simple frame and carried it into the living room. On the mantel, beside the photo of Laura, his late wife, he placed the new picture. Not as a replacement, not as a way to diminish the past, but as an acknowledgement that their family, though changed, had grown again. When Danielle saw it later, she paused, her hand hovering near the frame. "You sure?" she asked quietly. "Absolutely," Michael said. "This isn't temporary." Their eyes met, and in the quiet that followed, both understood what the picture meant. The empty spaces in their lives would never fully disappear, but they had been filled with something new, something that honored what had been lost, while building what could still be. In the end, what Michael, Emily, and Danielle found together was not about erasing grief, but about living alongside it. Loss had carved deep spaces in their lives, and for a long time, those spaces felt like emptiness that could never be filled. Yet, day by day, through small acts of care and moments of shared laughter, love began to seep back in. Danielle didn't replace Laura's place in their hearts. She became part of the continuation, a living thread that wove past and present together. Emily's smile, once rare and guarded, returned not because the pain was gone, but because she learned it could exist alongside joy. And Michael discovered that opening his heart again was not a betrayal of his loss, but a testament to it, that love was still possible, still worth choosing. Even in our darkest seasons, the heart can hold both sorrow and love at the same time. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means creating space for new connections while honoring the ones we've lost. The past shapes us, but it doesn't have to be the end of our story. Love can return in forms we never expect, and when it does, it proves that loss never has the final word. What about you? Have you ever found light again after a season of loss? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. And if this journey touched you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we can continue bringing you heartfelt stories that matter. Your voice is part of this community.